Hello all of you and welcome to Bones. Here we are with my skeleton that I'm going to have you name later on. We need a name for this person. But what I want you to do is go down the list that I gave you that's on Canvas that has that section on the vertebral column. So we start out with showing you, and I'm just going to read it to myself, which is cervical bones, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal. So where are those? So cervical, 7 cervical bones right here. So let me bring no name. Let me bring no name closer. And no name then is going to show you that, bring it this way, you're going to count 7. And the interesting thing is that all these vertebrates have 7, like a giraffe has how many of these bones in the cervical region? 7. No matter how big or small. So 7, and then the thoracic are these that are in the region of the thorax or in the region that has ribs. So those are the thoracic, and there's 12 of those. And lumbar, lower back, are 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the lumbar are those that are not attached to a rib. So the way that we remember that is breakfast at 7. Lunch at noon, 12, and an early dinner of 5. Okay, 5 that are lumbar. And then sacral and coccygeal. So your sacrum, this region here is your sacrum, and that has 5 bones, but they're completely fused. And we're going to look at those later. I'm going to show them much bigger to you. So those are fused, and then your coccyx right down here. That's your tailbone. And that can have anywhere from 3 to 5 that are also fused. We're all a little different. So 3 to 5. So that is the vertebral column. And what we want to do next is, according to your list, look at one vertebra. Let me move this. I want to look at one vertebra, and it's going to be a generic one. It's one that is not specific to the cervical region, or this one actually happens to be thoracic. And it's so interesting when you look at it like this. Looks like a giraffe, right? Do you see the ears and the horns of the giraffe? Looks like a giraffe. So we're going to look and go down your list. So a structure like this is going to have all of them, all the vertebra. Whichever I show you is going to have a body, right? So body is where my finger is holding on to. If I go like this up against that, you get a nice contrast. And then it has a foramen, which is a hole. So of course it only has one foramen here. So that's going to be the vertebral foramen. Okay, body, vertebral foramen. Next, if we look at it in the position here of the giraffe, let me get it straight here, there's going to be a transverse process. So if it's transverse, it's going in this direction, and a process is something that sticks out. So if this sticks out here, the ears of this giraffe, right, are going to be the transverse processes, if I have it in plural. So transverse process, transverse process. And then there's a spinous process. And the spinous process is what looks like a spine, which is the nose of my giraffe here. Spinous process. And intervertebral foramen. Remember we had a vertebral foramen, and now we're looking at intervertebral. Inter means between. So I would need a second vertebra here, and I would have a space that goes between one and the next vertebra. So that would be the intervertebral foramen. Do you see it in that aspect? It's easier to see. Oh my gosh, where can I show it to you? There. Okay. And then we want to look at regions of these bones that may have fragility, that may fracture, that may have some problem. So those regions are where these sort of edges meet the body, meet the major part of the chunkiest part of the bone. And so those two would be a lamina and a pedicle. So the lamina is this region here, where the transverse process is sort of meeting. And the pedicle, gosh, it's so hard with the camera. And the pedicle then is sort of behind where the horns of the giraffe are. It's this other region, which isn't really well delineated, but just think of it as a region of fragility because it's where some aspect meets the body, and it's where a bone meets another bone, and it can be a point of weakness. Okay, so in the anterior here it was the lamina, and then more posterior here is the pedicle. The way I remember it, pedicle has to do with foot, right? So a foot is attached onto the body. Foot, body, that's the pedicle, and in front of the lamina. Why do we need to know that? Those is used in, there was a fracture close to the body. Where? Was it in the lamina? Was it in the pedicle? Was it in the transverse process? We need to know those structures. Good. The next one would be facets. And a facet is where a bone meets another bone. So imagine then we have another bone that's going to meet up here and another bone that's going to meet down below, right? And we're going to have all these coming down the spine. So those are going to be facets, and there's going to be the superior articular facet, which is the one that's poking up here, which are really actually the horns of the giraffe. And the inferior articular facet, which would be underneath, I would have to tilt it for you to see that here and there are these little indentations that are a location where the second bone would be underneath it. Okay, so superior articular facet, inferior articular facet. And I'm going to stop it there. So now you have that group of structures that are identified. They're common features of all of the regions of the spine. Okay, and then later on we'll do, what is specific just to the thoracic? What is specific to the region of the neck here? What is specific to the lumbar? And we'll look at that separately, but for now you have that list. So where else are you going to look for these? Well, you can look at your Connect that has pictures of all this, and the book will have pictures of all of them for you to identify. So you should get to the point where you can bounce around and name them. That's where we want you to be. Okay, so I point transverse process. I point superior articular facet. I point body. What's this? It's not a hole. It's a foramen. What kind of foramen? Vertebral foramen. Well, what if it's between two? Well, then it's the intravertebral foramen. So that's where you have to get to. You have to get to the point where you can point and name and point and name. Okay? All right. Great. This is a good start. We'll do the next vertebra in the next video.